I will just would like to start with you introducing yourself a bit for people who don't know who you are and what you're doing. So I may start with Adele. Yes.
Hey, so my name is Adele Pentland. My pronouns are she, her. I normally work on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation in Nam, also known as Melbourne. But rather confusingly, I am currently in Stuttgart at the moment, doing a little research visit with funding from Graduate Women Western Australia, the Australian Geoscience Council, and the Australian Academy of Sciences, who awarded me an early career grant, as well as the Paleontological Association. And I don't actually describe myself as a paleo artist as such. The work that I do is mainly as a scientific consultant, trying to provide accuracy for my study species or my group, which is pterosaurs, flying reptiles that lived during the age of dinosaurs, and also working with regional natural history museums trying to get funding to then bring in other artists. So I've been doing a lot of work with Zev Landis as well, and just basically trying to build up a team of people. And yeah, that's enough about me.
Okay, so we have Astrid the next.
Hello. Hi. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to join these things. I love seeing everyone. My name is Astrid O'Connor. She, they. I'm also from Melbourne, from Naarm. I work in the lands of the Kulin Nation. Have done my whole life. I love this place. I am kind of a paleozoologist. I do a lot of zoology. I work a lot with animals that live in the ocean, everything that swims, that has flippers and fins, linking their forms to their functions. But how I got involved in all this stuff is I saw that there was a niche for having walking skeletons of animals, especially extinct Australian animals, which I think very cool and should be shared with the world. And so I taught myself Blender and had a bunch of these. I made a bunch of them, and now I'm here. And I'm very happy and delighted to join this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Alyssa, who are you? What are you doing?
Hello, I'm Alyssa Fjeld. I am also currently working in the same region as Astrid and Adele. I'm originally from an area of the United States. We don't know who the traditional custodians of Saudi Daisy, Tennessee were, which is a real shame, but I typically work with invertebrate specimens here in Australia, typically from the Flinders Ranges of South Australia. That's the Adyamanthana people. Some of my samples also come from Kangaroo Island, and broadly speaking, I look at museum specimens from kind of wherever we have complete trilobites at the moment. My area of research interest is how invertebrates from the early Cambrian grew their bodies, because that can tell us a lot about evolutionary patterns in animals today. And I would argue that both Adele and Astrid are far more artistic than me. Adele is super fashionable. She's being very humble, but she she made her own earrings. I'm ratting you out, Adele. Your art's beautiful. I don't know if you could call this art, but I do host a podcast. Here's our mug, art by the lovely Zev Landis. And I'm really interested, I guess, in the ways in which we depict paleontology in popular media. So whether that's art, movies, TV shows, the book Dinotopia, I'm really interested in how we as researchers reach the public with what we do and what the public does with what we tell them. So I guess you could say that I'm a bit more on that side of the art scale, but I also do all kinds of silly little doodles. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen them, and that's me.
Perfect. And then we have Natalia left.
Hiya, my name is Natalia Jagielska. I am a doctor in paleontology at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, where I work as a researcher of torso soft tissues, so things like anorganiphids, which are very, very fluffy and nice. So that's my work. I'm just looking at fluffiness of different dinosaurs. If they were fluffy, how they were fluffy, what's the fluff made of, if anything. So that's my current job as a postdoctoral fellow. Before that, I lived in the UK, and before I lived in the UK, I also briefly lived in China. But I'm Polish, so that's my main passport and things. So, yeah, I'm a pterosaur researcher full-time, based in China. Now, I also do paleo art, so I usually... It's hard to tell what paleo art is in a way, because I know some guys in community want to make paleo art as only the realistic reconstructions and not much of a stylized art. So I have no idea if paleo art as a label applies. I have no idea what's the consensus in the community. But I do some dinosaurs and prehistoric critters for children's books, museums, and other things, and I usually do it casually for fun in my free time when I'm not studying. And yeah, I'm planning on maybe leaving paleontology and going into museum and science engagement. Okay.
I guess you also, thanks a lot. You also mentioned like in the last sentence, like engagement, like also outreach. I guess what all of you also combines is that you do like SciComm a lot, to some extent also share it a lot. Either it's like the podcast or different like channels speak up. I guess it's also one of the main things I notice about all of you, that you use either use like to communicate scientific contents, but also everything around what's happening in paleontology. And the most frequent thing somebody can hear is like the Fossil Fiction podcast. So Alyssa, from your point of view, you talk with a lot of people recently, like not only you, but also Travis. But where do women stand at the moment in terms, like it's more paleontology, maybe for paleoart, I'm not sure how many people you talk to, but what is your point of view? Where do stand women? How is about how valued are they, like from the discussions you had so far?
So I think from my side, so just to be upfront, I've never actually published a scientific article. I've got one in the works at the moment, so I can really only speak to, yeah, I guess more the podcasting and just my casual network here in Australia. But I would say one thing that I've seen, because I'm a dinosaur, I'm very old in the field. I'm 34 this year, and I've been in paleo or around paleo for I don't know what you're saying, Astrid. I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this since about 2012. And I've seen one thing coming in that I think is really positive, which is a much more visual representation of diversity in how you can be a woman in paleontology. So one thing that I guess I've seen a lot of in the old generations of female paleontologists is this kind of like, it's a man's world and you kind of need to be a man to get by. So a lot of the female academics that end up in really successful positions are women who can do that really successfully. A positive example that comes to mind for me is Marissa Betts, who kicks ass up and down Australia's coast every single year. And she's very successful in the traditional academic sense. And I think there's a lot of expectation that's kind of going out as new generations come in, that women behave in a certain way to achieve that kind of academic success. But I would say that the big blind spots that I've noticed is a lack of recognition and respect and acknowledgement in peer-reviewed articles for women who operate within the field outside of that academic kind of narrow band. Like, I have degrees, I have standing with an institution, right? So we have all of these female researchers who may hold like a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree in biology or geology, and they are people who are working as techs in labs for decades. They're women who are on these digs as volunteers who possess like a tremendous quantity of knowledge about what they're doing, but we don't necessarily within the citation system in peer-reviewed journals that exists now have a way to acknowledge that work meaningfully. And a lot of the time I find that these are women who are not fighting for that traditional style of recognition. So they're not necessarily asking for people to name stuff after them. Like, I can't speak to everybody else's experiences, but every single time it's name this dinosaur after me, it's a man at the other end of that question. And it's I think a real dearth of recognition for women in that capacity, I would say. And then I would say as well, I don't face that kind of discrimination within my lab here at Monash, so I'm speaking to a lot of other people's experiences here.
So when it comes to, I'll make it to Natalia, you like published a lot of different studies. What was your experience from, especially in the UK? Like, you spent a lot of time in the UK, you spent a lot of time in a very traditional environment, let's say. Like, it was in Edinburgh, but also the rest of the UK is really in a traditional field. Like, how was your perspective on being valued, being represented also with like fellow scientists?
Okay, so I existed in the UK academic sphere, but almost all my supervisors, once I entered paleontology in academia, were guys from the US. So both Roy Virgilius, Phil Manning, and Steve Brustati, very US-based guys. So as soon as I entered paleontology, I was surrounded by guys from the US. So it was a big culture shock and economic shock and everything. So it felt slightly different. And because they were so central to the US, they engaged a lot with SVP and go to fossil digs in the US. Out of the master students and even PhD students were also from the US. So you sort of felt like, okay, I'm in the UK, but I'm surrounded by weirdly affluent US people. That was a big shock that you sort of don't expect. But as a specific thing only for my directions of Steve Brusati, who happened to be vertebrate paleontologist that does prehistoric reptiles and dinosaurs, and Phil Manning, who works on, I did some things on Green River with him, so not really technically birds are dinosaurs, but not that. So that was kind of interesting for me. And when I was publishing, apart from one of the co-authors, Amelia, who actually found the pterosaur, she's an invertebrate researcher, Amelia Penny. There was no other woman vertebrate researchers in any research that I did when I was on my master's and my PhD. So all my co-authors in almost all projects were in vertebrate paleontology were all guys. And as a master or PhD student, you really don't have that much say regarding your co-authors because you don't know anyone, you don't know the rules about it, so you sort of just roll with it. So each time you tune in for a conversation, you're just surrounded by guys, and you're usually the only person that's not a guy. And yeah, that's just normal, I guess. You just have accepted because there's just not that many people in vertebrate paleontology, so you don't know anything. You don't know how much autonomy you have to say anything about it. And yeah, no, otherwise I have not, initially in the first steps, when in my first 2 years, I did not feel that much discrimination, especially during masters, because I'm at a very low level, so you just sort of get into learning the ropes. I was not a big fan of networking, because it's usually getting drunk in a pub with other guys, which are UK and from the US, and when you're other person that's you're not from UK, you're not from the US, I'm not a guy, and you don't drink alcohol, so suddenly this entire avenue of networking and working with people completely disappears. And I, for a very long time, sort of believed myself, like, why can't I fit in? What's wrong with you? That's why do I have such a weak personality? And it turns out I just never clicked. I'm like, I can't fit in because I'm just not part of the demographic, and I probably never will be because I don't have the right upbringing, I don't have the right, basically makeup to get in that setting, and I don't really want to because it's not something I feel comfortable in or even want to see myself doing. Yeah, but I found a lot of collegial friendship with invertebrate paleontologists because they're slightly more diverse. There's less competition, there's less wind blowing because not many people really care that about invertebrates, which is a shame because they're amazing. And those people are usually not dino boys, so in vertebrate paleontology, there's a lot of guys that are really into dinosaurs and Transformers and Pokemon, which is great, but it's like, I'm not even into any of those things. I grew up through my Pokemon phase when I was 3, so I usually just got along better with the invertebrate people because they're slightly more diverse, but what very esoteric interests. Like, you have to be a very weird person if you want to study Claudinids, because that's a very specific thing that probably nobody else is interested in. So yeah, that was my engagement with paleontology in the UK, which is doing relatively well on global scale when coming to inclusion of women. So there's some women in senior positions, and they make around 30%-ish of the vertebrate paleontology makeup. So it's better than China. China has slightly less women in paleo, in vertebrate paleo. It will change probably with time. We are talking about a very small sample size of people. So even like 1 or 2 people going and living changes the percentage of how many women and men are quite drastically. But yeah, and in terms of paleontology, when I entered, I thought there's not many. So Liz Martin Silverstone was the only active woman in pterosaur field, if I'm not mistaken. But once I got slightly longer time in the field and looking for people, there were a lot of women that entered in the 90s and 2000s. They just didn't sort of survive in academia past doctorates. So there's a lot of women that enter paleontology. In fact, a lot of sciences, we have something called the scissor graph, in which there's a lot of women entering at the undergraduate level, and they just drop out steadily when they go to masters, when they go to PhD, postdocs, and professors. So we are talking about like single digits when it's coming to percentage representation. So there's a decent 50-50 uptake of students at the undergraduate level, which very quickly drops the further steps you go along the paleontological ladder. yeah, I don't know how. Now I know there's a lot of movement that active in pterosaurs, but they might not be employed full time as researchers. And yeah, no, it's kind of sad because those women were there, they could be there, but there's something leading them to drop out. And there's a lot of factors like lack of good supportive carers, competitive coworkers, inaccessibility of some specimens, like this boy club attitude, especially when coming to access to some pterosaur specimens, even techniques. So there's something called the Golem effect, where senior academics prevent you from accessing certain specimens, publishing on certain topics, or even using certain methodology. And there's probably those things accumulate and lead to this rapid drop of, like, we probably should have a generation of pterosaur researchers, which is a very small field, right? Maybe 10 people maximum. But they just dropped out, and I'm trying to get back to them and pick up some of the research they left behind. But it's like a slow process. Yeah, otherwise I think I got on all right in Paleo. I'm surprised I'm doing a postdoc because I wanted to drop out straight after master. So my first engagement was like the conference scheme, going to a conference. I realized, like, I hate this. I don't want to have anything to do with this. But realized it's very hard to change for actually well-paying jobs after finishing paleontology. So I'm just sort of chugging through. Surprised I'm going as far as I went with basically fumes.
No, I guess we're also, like, I'm following your journey for quite a while now, and it's really inspiring. But I also know a lot of people from the UK who drop out after the master's or PhD just because of the, like, not in paleontology per se, but like everywhere, just because of the pressure, like when it comes to publication pressure, to non-existing work-life balance, working on weekends, 10 to 12-hour shifts, and really saying at some point, no, I cannot deal with this kind of stuff anymore. I had one remark. I guess there are some people who won't agree with the Pokemon statement. Some people never grew out of it. When it comes to, like, I will pick up on the pterosaurs. Adele, you are one of the pterosaur paleontologists. How is it, like, from your perspective? How many people are there to exchange with? How many of them are, like, how difficult it is from your field, like, picking up on what Natalia said?
Okay, picking up on what Natalia said, I am still very much in my Pokemon phase. This is my Pokewalker and it has an Aerodactyl in it. So yeah, I definitely see truth in what Natalia said in terms of postdocs being super competitive. I have to admit, I am now not going to be a full-time researcher. I've actually signed a contract for another position, which is still like paleo adjacent, and I'm really excited about it. But it's also going to be interesting just trying to limit myself to working on papers essentially in my free time. I will say that there are some amazing like female pterosaur researchers. Taisa Rodriguez, who is based in Brazil, she does a lot of work with SciComm and outreach. I believe she has also tried to champion outreach programs wherein they get buses from schools that are low SES, low socioeconomic, to actually go into the university and do programs, which is absolutely incredible. And there is also Lara Kudinil. I've probably butchered the pronunciation of her name, but she did a lot of work on a funky little critter called pterodostro, which is colloquially known as the flamingo pterosaur. Has this weird, like, gravy boat shaped jaw with heaps and heaps of like little teeth, like true teeth, not like a baleen. But yeah, there aren't a whole heap of pterosaur researchers. There aren't that many women. And then across, I know this is definitely true in Australia, but in undergrad and postgrad, we're seeing about a 50-50, I think, version of women. I think this is across geosciences. And then, yeah, we have this like point where there's a crossover and there's systemic issues that are preventing women from getting to those higher levels. As Alyssa was saying, Marissa Betts got promoted last year. I believe she's now an associate professor, which is amazing, but she's also worked incredibly hard for it as well. And I suppose one of the other things is it's really hard to know why you're not getting chosen for things. Discrimination isn't always apparent. I am very, very, very fortunate. I'm half Chinese. Chinese New Year's on it starts on this Saturday, so Gung Hai Fa Choi. But I have a lot of white privilege. I've been so blessed as well. I have had two incredible women on my PhD supervisory team, Professor Pat Vickers-Rich, who strapped her, I think, 3-month-old baby onto her back to do digging at Dinosaur Cove. And then Professor Cleety Grice, who's like an expert in geochemistry. And then my other supervisor, Steve Purapat, he's been absolutely incredible. He's been a huge support. He's a friend and he's a mentor as well. So yeah, I definitely see those parallels, those undercurrents, and this tension as well. But I would also argue that as women, we face these issues, but it's also other minorities as well. It can be things like language barriers as well, and it also comes down to the opportunities that we have.
Okay, so this also goes right into the potential reasons for underrepresentation, not only in the field, but also in leading roles. Maybe I would just also ask Astrid for their take on the representation, maybe in your field or what you experienced. If you feel valued and acknowledged.
Yeah, it's interesting answering this question because you're approaching this from like a single perspective of a single university and a single like country, a single way of looking at things. And I don't know. I think that it seems like more and more academic institutions and other institutions like museums and other things with collections and even media institutions, places that are involved in these kinds of fields, whether they are actively researching or not. It seems like diversity is of all kinds is something that people are working towards, but I'm also like you see on a day-to-day basis, for example, in Australia, when you look at the heads of collections of museums, there aren't many women. If you look at the heads of the labs in my university, there aren't many women. If you look at the heads of the universities, there aren't many women. There are a couple. There aren't many. If you look at, people in the field, it's pretty 50-50, which I think is interesting. I wonder if there is a specific thing to academia. I have personally encountered the monolith that is the research paper name change issue, and I think that it is an issue for a lot of people in a lot of different ways, whether it's a first name change or a last name change. It can be hard, and it's also just a really weird existing barrier to something that is seen as a societal expectation, especially for like women who marry and take their partner's name. That's a really strange thing that is still kind of built into the system, but yeah, whatever. Look, I think that it's weird. It's something that I speak to people on an everyday basis, and people seem at an individual level to be very much for giving everyone opportunities. But I'm not sure if it's reached the institutional level yet.
So is there, because despite, I guess there are, like, not only in Australia, many men in leading roles and also in the boards. Do you see changes in programs and tools they offer to improve equity and
Yeah, I think it's a systemic thing, unfortunately. I think that it's something that's kind of built into the roots of what academia was founded on. And this idea that that's where you, just to go back to the name thing, that's where you trace people's research history. You kind of search it up and it goes through things, and it's really hard to make that work. And I don't know. I think that we live in a world where it's sometimes hard to have hope about some of this stuff, especially looking at the things that happen overseas, but also in our own country. And I like to hope that sometimes people bring their more individual values to the forefront in their workplace experiences.
I just saw the comment from Natalia and like going straight into it. Natalia, what do you think could be the reason? So there are many people working in this time zone, which might be more suitable to talk about diversity and the system inside this panel, like as you mentioned. And you also told me that before when we were chatting. But it's also very hard in this bubble, like this Instagram social media bubble, to really find these people or get them to the panels? What do you think could be the reason, or it's improved? Is it like some kind of language barrier? Is it some kind of it's really enclosed system? What's your take on that?
I mean, I'm really happy that internet is slowly democratizing paleo art because it allows people that even have the language barrier to share their artworks and get engagement because of the amazing artworks. So we have amazing artists coming from Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, of course, mainland China, Japan, Korea. Those like language barriers still exist, even though you're posting on Blue Sky or Twitter or Instagram. It's very Anglo-centric environment, so you have to like stick to the things to be noticed and be part of a conversation. And so many people can be just self-conscious about being surrounded by panelists where most people are natively English and they might not be. It's also like conversations about diversity inclusivity might be different for different countries and they might not. It depends on different pressures people might have with time, with other elements. But yeah, when I realized this, I didn't even like wanted to be on the panel because I thought, oh, that's mainly probably for amazing people coming from within this time zone. So like the late afternoon, there will be amazing artists that we have from Japan, from mainland, from Hong Kong. And I send the information to the artists that I know, but they never they got back, but they were either busy or they found it quite intimidating, which is always kind of like, come on, let's talk to the wider community. Let's be part of the global team. So yeah, I guess it really depends. So for me, like I came out as late on this panel because I kind of felt awkward. I'm like, oh, it's meant to be an Asian representation, and I'm here, a white European person calling from Hong Kong. So it kind of felt a bit awkward, especially knowing that there are actual palaeontologists here, and I tried to reach out to them to get involved instead of me, but they are busy because they have their own responsibilities. And right now it's 4 p.m., so most people are still at work.
Like you also said, it's quite intimidating. What would be more appealing for them? Like what would it make more appealing to attend those kind of sessions or engage in this kind of panels or networking? Doesn't necessarily need to be a panelist, but maybe just be a listener, or there are lots of people in the also European community in the gallery sessions who didn't talk at the beginning, but like join regularly and then gain some confidence. What would make a difference in this kind of online setup? Maybe it's to Natalia, but can also be from anybody else.
I mean, I think there's a certain element that I touched on a little bit, and that Natalia, I think, is also touching on, of pay to play in paleo. And unfortunately, I think that can limit a lot of the access that academics in countries that we would not consider like countries like China, where maybe it's just access even to the societies that put these events on. I mean, most conferences, you're paying hundreds of dollars to attend. But with virtual events, I think it could just be a limitation of allowing the people who are experts in their field from these countries to feel like we regard them in the same way. And I don't know how we could best go about that, but I think reaching out and asking them might be a really important first step. Finding some way of contacting these authors in like South America or China or Asia, more broadly Thailand. There's some really incredible work being done with petrified forests in Thailand, and maybe finding out what it would mean to those folks to talk about their research and what limitations they see.
Yeah, so maybe it really makes sense, and also, reach out. I guess it's really like, just from my very limited view and perspective, I have this European bubble, so it's very restricted, and to find these people, especially in Instagram, where everything is kind of tailored. So yeah, I guess it's also depends on the network a lot to find those people, like step by step, and encourage them to talk about their artwork and science.
Those people are like hiding in crevices. They are very active on social media. So Japan, they have a huge annual gallery that they sort of rotate around with repeating artists. And yeah, they are there. Most of them are not fluent English speakers because a lot of people in Japan are just not. So they sort of are in the mainly Japanese bubble, which is great. Like that's great for them. That's a community they exist with. Being one of the presenters on one of the galleries, they had a very lovely, very diverse team of like very young kids and all of the people and moms and Yeah, and very multimedia. So some people are making plates and cups. It's like we don't have a plate and cup paleo art in Europe. We should have like a more multimedia approach as they are doing. But like, oh, they're doing some great stuff. So like, there's amazing vocal paleo art community in Japan, but it's Japanese. So that's sort of I expect that's what's normal for Japan. For mainland China, you have this problem because there's a VPN. Many people can bypass it, but most people sort of are confined to what's accessible and available for them. So I know a lot of artists, but they usually stay within Weibo, Red Note community, and they engage with each other and communicate, and they have the shared group chats, everything, which again mainly Putonghua and within that community. So, and those countries like China makes up 30% of the world, it's a huge portion of the global population. It's tiny compared to what US and Europe is. So in a way that community is huge, we're just not part of it because it's mainly Putonghua. So we can't say like, oh, those communities are invisible because they're visible where they're meant to be visible in a way. It's just like we have those separate spheres that don't really interact with each other. And it's sort of trying to get them to interact. But again, when we get them to interact, it will be a pressure for the Japanese Putonghua teams to learn English, speak English, usually in English-dominated setting, and that creates this not very nice balance of power at the welcoming point. Because I guess we won't be expected to learn Japanese or Putonghua and join in. Usually it's the other way around, because we treat English as the norm on all of the international platforms, even on this panel, in which English is not a native language at all. It was usually brought here quite forcefully. So yeah, so it's something we should sort of consider and definitely not sort of downplay as those communities as if they don't exist, because they do, and they are very vocal and very visible. They just don't have to be within the Anglosphere. But how do we combine them together without somebody introducing that power imbalance? I have no idea how to do it well.
Yeah, I guess it's quite a challenge. And I also know from some people that they're like that it's a very active field, but really something like from my perspective, really out of my view. I want to circle back a little bit to the things where I interrupted Astrid a bit with the tools and programs at institutions. Adele, you have lots of, like also recently, especially last year, you posted lots of SciComm regarding women of color in STEM and very things besides the university and its field. How is it for you inside the university? Was there something you say? And also maybe towards your new position, is there something you say, okay, there are tools for improving equity and diversity? Or is it something which is in progress or lacking tools and programs at all?
Ooh, okay, big meaty question. So I think in terms of things that can improve and encourage diversity and equity within the institutions that I've been part of, it's not something that I've really seen from a top-down level. They are things that I've tried to pursue myself or tried to seek external funding for. And then I was also lucky to be part of Women of Color in STEM. So that was a beautiful experience because growing up as someone who is half Chinese but not speaking any of it as well, because it was viewed as something that would create a divide and a barrier for communication within my own household. It was beautiful to be surrounded by these incredibly talented engineers and software specialists and AI experts who were born overseas and came to Australia as international students, and they've found and built their own community there. And it was interesting to sort of, when you're biracial, you feel like you are two halves, that you are not quite enough, having to just even explain to people who you are and the subtext of you're not white, so what are you? What are you doing here? I have tried to tell myself many times throughout the years that, you know, they want to understand, they're just curious, but on bad days, it can feel very alienating, almost humiliating, not to be able to just be able to exist in a space and given the same respect that some other people have. But for me, being part of the Women of Color in STEM group is trying to also understand how to be a better ally as well and how to support them. That particular group didn't focus on things specific to technical expertise. It was more focused on soft skills and building confidence. I think a lot of sort of one of the underlying things and threads connecting these conversations is how do we build up our own confidence to be in spaces and vouch for ourselves and put ourselves out there, but then also how do we then make it easier for people that are coming through and give them a hand up or a leg up as well. And it's not easy to do. There aren't like a lot of courses available, as I said before. I think calling back to what Astrid mentioned about on an individual level, people are very happy to share what they know. And that's certainly the case for me. I am chronically saying yes to things. I'm very bad at saying no to things. Lots of people know this about me. I try not to wear busy as a badge of honor, but in saying that, if someone did reach out to me and said, hey, I know you got this grant. Would you mind sharing your application? Yes, I'd be happy to do that. I'd be happy to share things that I learned through another program called Superstars of STEM, where we do media engagement and training as well. But I think it's also just mindset. I think some of the most powerful things we can do is continue to reach out to people. Just because someone said no once doesn't mean that they'll say no in the future. It doesn't hurt to send a follow-up email in a few months' time saying, oh, I realized you were busy because of this time zone difference. We've actually made the session so that it starts at this time. Would you be interested if that was the case? And then also trying to as you get more people to sign on to things, be like, oh, I know you follow so-and-so, they're actually going to be here at this thing. Things like that to make things a little bit more welcoming and more grounded as well, to remove those barriers. But there's definitely not a silver bullet solution. And I think one of the things that I would like to do throughout my career is think about ways in which I can support diversity throughout my career. And it might just be as simple as mentoring and providing unofficial mentorship and guidance to others. And that I would be happy with that, because there'll be a ripple effect. If that helps them and they go on to do amazing things in their career, hopefully they'll do the same for other people.
I guess so. And I don't think it's a small thing to do. It has a huge impact on any individual to do that. You mentioned at one point the building confidence and having confidence. There is one study I've read about the role of overconfidence of men in top jobs, which also says, yeah, there is some effect that especially men who are more overconfident, that this shapes the decision to study STEM at all and also like tackle these top jobs just because they think they could do it, even though it's not proven, which I also see. Like, I'm working in industrial automation. It happens a lot. There are not many women. There's a lot of overconfidence in people I interview or work with. Is there something you say would be applicable in paleontology as well? Maybe go to Alyssa.
So I think one of the big things that we haven't talked about yet that is a big limitation for women is the expectation of emotional labor, especially in industry settings. There is, I think, a lot of culture of expectation. Like I said, that you be a certain kind of lady in these jobs, and that means like if there's somebody's birthday, you're going to be the one who is expected to do some labor in putting together that event. Or it could be something like your supervisor doesn't manage their emotions very well because they're a man and they've never been given any kind of tools to do that by society or institutions. And when they have an emotional reaction to something, you are expected to then perform the emotional labor of like not letting that affect you. And I think there's been some really good research that's come out recently talking about how when it comes to how teaching associates and other professional academics who teach as well, there is negative feedback from students who expect their female teachers or female presenting teachers to do more emotional labor in presenting them with correct solutions or assistance or grading. They're expecting more commentary, more feedback, and all of this is stuff that everyone can do, but it's expected of us. And I think that one thing institutions could really should do, because it's like Adele says, it's like Natalia says, it's so institutionalized, it's so top down. It's, I think, really important that we start holding older, especially male academics, responsible for a certain amount of emotional understanding, training. How do you manage this stuff? How do you manage your own emotions? What happens if something is really wrong in your environment? Just to touch on a couple of things that might come up. But the casual misogyny that I think a lot of older academics have, or ableism or ageism, usually it's just that you see it with women first because we are percent-wise still more likely to be in these settings. But I think any institution that's treating its women poorly, that's a great red flag for how they're going to treat you if you're part of any other marginalized identity. And I think, there's a lot of good to be said for women-led organizations and women-led institutions and things that give you skills that would otherwise not be accessible to you if you come from a different socioeconomic background, if you don't have the money to go on these digs or to access training. These programs are invaluable. And I certainly think that more women in leadership is also really important. But more importantly than just giving you leadership tools is the support that female academics or professional leaders should be showing you in doing things like saying you should be on this paper. You should be the one putting forward your idea in a board meeting, not it coming from your supervisor dressing it up. And I think that's something that can only happen when women occupy higher positions of leadership. And I don't quite know how we navigate women into those positions, but I think it takes them being there for them to make this kind of difference. And I think it's got to come from the institutions first.
I also think it needs to come from the institutions and raising awareness. So you need to get the board members to change their minds, go to workshops, having this kind of discussions, which people are commonly lacking, unfortunately, because there's lots of things to learn, from everyone. I also realized that there are many, I will just pick the men because they have most of the leader roles. Many men never attended some kind of management workshop or kind of course or how to deal with stuff. So this is really everything comes from the society. So they don't expect themselves to take the role, especially in emotional matters. It's really sad, let's say it like that.
But sadly, I think even like a workshop, it feels like a band-aid that we stick on of we'll just do this anti-sexual harassment workshop that every guy and woman has to attend. But, if you're holding a certain set of beliefs or something that's just ingrained with you and it's supported systematically, I don't think a workshop will solve it. So, for example, a lot of discrimination of women in sciences is usually it's microaggressions, but also it might be subconscious and systemic. So it will be, for example, us being judged on our impact factor and the hate index. And usually as women, people have higher responsibilities, as mentioned previously, of providing additional mentoring support for younger students, leading the community, doing science outreach. And those things don't contribute to hate index or how we are assessed as academics. So for us, doing this things as we expect, we're not expected to do it, but I'll feel horrible if I don't do any outreach, if I don't look out after my PhD students below me, or if I don't do any mentoring. So I will just feel horrible. But if I do it, I'm wasting time that could be going into me increasing my hate index and actually getting me a job in Palaeo. So a lot of guys I know that do postdocs, and it's like, oh, do you doing any outreach? Do you do any mentoring? Do you do any DII things that will be helping your local community? And it's like, if I'm not getting paid, and if it's not substantial enough and doesn't contribute to my CV, I'm not interested. And they don't feel that pressure to do anything, and they're not systematically pressured to do it, because most institutions don't look at this. They don't care if you did a preschool event and it took you a day. It's like you wasted a day that could went on co-authorship with somebody else that ended in Nature paper. So we have to change how we assess our performance in academic settings and how we value different contributions, especially in outreach and other elements. So we don't glorify this selfish, individualistic character type and this overconfidence that leads into nature publications and science publications, PNS and cell publications, which are the thing that is usually what we are judged on university as academics. And yeah, it's so I don't think like a workshop will help anything. It will just probably waste somebody's time. And we should just change systematically how we do it. So remove H-index, remove how we look for grants, change how networking looks in academic settings, and make some men accountable, because as a woman, if you make a small misstep in the field, you might get severely punished. For example, you might miss on a grant, you might not be liked by a peer reviewer, and he'll just drag your study for mud, so it will never get published. And we know that women are more likely to just fall in peer review, have less papers because of that attitude. And they are not held accountable because you cannot really, blackmail, just report somebody for peer review or poor conference behavior. So I wish there was some accountability and some pressure on guys who are not crossing the line, but are just there to will impede your progress as a researcher, and they're usually not held accountable, like the Golem effect. Nobody will be blaming somebody for gatekeeping a fossil collection. But like that shouldn't be done. It's sort of impeding science, which is fairly normal in the field. So yeah, so it's just changing how we look at the current systems that are here, and just changing how we punish some guys for poor behavior, and why this punishment is accentuated when a woman does a misstep, like a very minor thing, or even just has to like step down because she's emotionally distressed because of a family matter. She probably has to look forward to. She has a family to look after, like the responsibility that's usually relegated to women, unfortunately. And a guy that does something very unethical might just get scot-free, be protected by his institution. And I think like recently that has been very, very visible with the current scandal, with some institutions who are ready to like get in the way of some women academics making minor missteps, but will jump in to protect some senior academics that are well established and will bring a lot of money. So I wish we leveled the field a bit with that. But yeah, and that just comes from high level of the universities of just change how you assess people and how you sort of approach certain behaviors, why we are normalizing certain behaviors that senior men with that overconfidence can't get, they get by with no real consequence. And yeah, I don't think it's that easy because we have to dismantle entire academic institution. Like publishing, it's something that we started doing since the formation of Pergamon Press and other things. So it's already been for at least 5 decades. So how do we move past the nature science cell model, and which is incentivizing publish or perish, push for a very specific gatekeeping behavior to have the best specimen that nobody can see, restrict people going to a certain fossil site, so you have that specific nature paper nobody will get to you, and you'll have your first name authorship, you'll have this lovely H-index in a high IF paper, and you'll get this lovely tenure because of it. So I wish we stopped that if we can. I don't think it should be easy. Let's just stop doing that. We're wasting so much money, paying for open access for some papers with high IF. Why are we doing this? We are putting $2,000, $3,000 into research just to put a for-profit journal that the university then has to pay to access. What's this system even about?
Yeah, I also agree that the single workshop might not be beneficial. So it's really needs to be changed systemically. I guess it's also a challenge to address single people. For me, I think there's some kind of balance between forcing people to have a different perspective on their beliefs and trying to get them out of their bubble. I think it's a tricky. You mentioned, I will go to the more person-specific questions. Natalia mentioned how to get to positions. There's one thing which I recognized in the UK, which is the high tables thing. A high table is a specific, it's a set of table where only invited people can attend and eat their dinner and stuff. And everybody else has the rest of the room basically for them. This is where this question comes from basically. How do you know you can sit at a table with your colleagues? Really saying, is there something you need to put extra effort into to feel like you can sit at the same table? And the high table is just a reference, but I guess it's in some labs like that there is a specific group of people who exchange regularly and you fight your way to the table. Maybe going to Astrid, is there anything you say, okay, I experience it like that. I need to find to sit with my colleagues or mentors at this table?
Yes, is the answer. I think that gods, it's a tricky one. I think that there are so many different examples of tables like that, whether it's financially, whether it's like job stability. For me, it's anything that includes women events. I'm always like, that's not something I should be at, right? But recently it's been better. But still, it's a I don't know. Um, I I think that I think that the only thing that you can do to kind of get around this self-doubt for sitting at tables where is people deserve to be is having examples out there in the wild of people being there, especially just straight up jobs. People being in jobs that have those positions. Yes, I think that there really is a expectation when you reach a certain level of especially science communication that you should know everything. And I think that once you get put in any kind of public space, you become the spokesperson for your whole field. And I think that what that does is it really precludes people being like, but I know a lot about this. If I get asked about, I don't know, current works on de-extinction, that's not my area of expertise, but I get asked it a lot in public spaces when I do SciComm work. You kind of just have to be on top of some of this stuff. And I think that that is a real barrier for people wanting to be at the table for any kind of event, whether it's SciComm, whether it's field related, whether it's research, conferences. They have to feel like, oh, I have to be ready for any question. I have to be ready for anything like that. And there are some people that are really good at it and they just have this skill. There are some people that learn this skill really well. We have to be, as a society, better at acknowledging that experts should not know everything. And we, as experts, should be better at being like, I don't know the answer to this, but here's some things that I do know around it, or here's some places that I could point you that will be better at doing it. Or perhaps if a panel reaches out and you feel like you're not the most representative person for that, passing it on to someone you think might be. I don't know. I don't know if there's a solution. I think that everyone has stories to tell, and so being like mine is not good enough is a hard thing to say. But I do think that having more opportunities will lessen this problem more.
Oh, there was really a lot. I also think that you don't need to know everything from your field to be part of a specific like group of people or just attend. So I think it's also a lot about exchanging ideas and thoughts and experiences. So when, say, Alyssa, you have two things to cover. One is your scientific thing. The other thing is like hosting a podcast, competing with other people hosting a podcast. Was there ever a time where you say, okay, there's like, is it enough what I'm doing? Has it a similar quality compared to other stuff?
So there's definitely a lot of stuff that I get wrong on the podcast. There are people in this audience that have let me know very, very, very nicely when that happens. And it's always something that's not directly what I study. And I do try frequently on the show to say, like, this is not my wheelhouse. I'm about to say something dumb. And I think Travis actually quite likes that. Travis, I'm sorry, I'm not slandering you, but like, he'll give me fun dinosaur names that I don't know how to say because it's, on the one hand, it's like you're bringing a level of humility to what you do. And this is something that we learned when I taught in Japan was that a lot of the time students are so afraid of making mistakes, especially if they've been punished for that unduly in the past. And I would say a lot of us who are women or people in marginalized identities, we are more unjustly given negative feedback in a lot of circumstances. But being able to see someone that you regard as an authority in some aspect of the space, like Astrid says, and seeing them try to talk about other fields, but making mistakes, acknowledging those mistakes and looking stuff up when it matters, I think is a better way to set an example as a scientist than to just charge ahead like you know absolutely everything. And I would say like maybe part of that is coming from this place of like we reward charismatic assholes really disproportionately in the fields of paleontology and physics. Like, I'm sorry, it's a big reality. There's a lot of dino weenies that make it into positions of power without having to grow in emotional capacity. And that's a big limitation that creates this image in the media, right? Because if you just are a reporter and you just want one dude you can call with all your questions about dinosaurs, you're just going to have your one dude. And that doesn't leave a lot of space for new voices to come into the field who might know more about a given topic, especially if this is someone that's not willing to share that kind of credit. And then I would say that I am a much worse science writer, which is a completely different thing than what we do with the podcast. You are saying something different for a completely different purpose. And if you lose sight of that, both of your types of communication will suffer. So when I'm communicating science to people, I'm trying to convey knowledge to them. When I'm trying to write professional, academic, scientific work, I am trying to make an argument that the thing I have found is right. And I think keeping in mind the difference between those two things, like the times when you want to be accurate versus quickly understood, is a trade-off that like maybe I see some people doing it really, really well, like the Weird and Dead podcast. I think they're great. I think Adele does a fantastic job of like communicating with other scientists in a way where it's like, yes, like I can also see your voice and when I read your publications in scientific literature, like you maintain this consistent persona across both that I think is really cool.
Adele, when it comes to you, you said like you have a new position. You also may change the subject of like what you're studying, for example, new species or new taxa. Do you think, and it's very provocative, do you think you can sit at a table with your colleagues who are like have way more knowledge about the taxa and you're just new to the field? Or is it like more easy to you? How much effort do you think you need to put in? And it's a very provocative like question.
No, I love that. I think it's going to be difficult until I actually sit down and get there. But in terms of the new position, I've actually met that team before. I've sat in the tea room with them, and it was an incredible moment to be surrounded by someone who's just started their PhD, whereas I've basically finished, and my future boss. And I just remember sitting back and thinking, wow, I know literally nothing about this group. These people are so amazing. But for me, it's an amazing learning opportunity because I know a lot about something that they're not experts in, and there will be an exchange of information. I think also I want to circle back to something Astrid said as well. I think for me, it's so interesting because I don't feel like I have the anxiety of I must like know everything, I must get everything right, because I've tried to normalize saying I don't know. What I can speak to is XYZ and things like that. And just, yeah, trying to normalize the fact that I'm an expert in like this narrow field. For the moment, it's been Australian pterosaurs from the mid-Cretaceous, mostly from the eastern side of the continent. Fortunately, there's only 2 bones from the western side. And yet that leaves a whole huge, massive, gaping hole in my knowledge in terms of Triassic and Jurassic Age material, which is something I'm trying to address with this current research trip that I'm undertaking. But in terms of, yeah, feeling worried about sitting at a table with people that know more than me, I don't really feel that anymore. And I think that comes just from exposure therapy, essentially, being in situations where I've done that before. I had a chance meeting with Dr. Dave Unwin, who has basically been publishing pterosaurs since about as long as I've been alive. And I realized from a conversation that I had with him that I made a horrible gaffe, and I like demonstrated that I hadn't read something. And part of me is just like, oh, well, he's gonna think that you're an idiot and blah, 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 all this stuff. But it's also like, he probably also understands that I'm a very time poor person. I said that I had like a few different like commitments that I was juggling, unpaid labor in the form of peer reviewing for these publications that are robbing us blind, charging us what, like sometimes €2,500, like 5,000 Australian dollars to publish in them for open access. I think I've also gotten very comfortable as I've gotten older as well with telling myself that if someone is going to judge me for making a small like fumble essentially and not getting everything right 100% of the time, they're not my person. They're not backing me. I don't really want their support. Obviously, it's much more difficult in a professional setting. However, when you have those like defined boundaries of, this is the rules of engagement, this is how we will interact, and this is how we need each other and how we will collaborate and work together towards this main goal, I'm more at peace with it. I think it might also just be understanding that not everyone will like me and being comfortable with that. Not everyone has to like me. Ideally, I would like to be respected in my field, but there will always be points of difference. There will be times there are people that I meet and I don't agree with your science, but they're a fine person to engage with as well. So navigating all of those things has made things easier, but certainly, 10 years ago, I was a little ball of anxiety, just like, ugh, like trying to talk in a way that was very much a persona, whereas I feel like the persona has come off. I'm more relaxed. I'm Dell in like a lot of capacities.
Yeah, what I think it's important to normalize to not knowing things and to that you are sitting with people. Like when you are in a new position or in a new lab, you are there because of your skills, like you are selected because of the skills. And it's not, I guess it should not be expected that you know everything because you are there for a reason. Like if it's psychom, you have proven that you could do psychom already, like at some point. And there's always things to learn, but I guess the basics is I can just assume because I'm in a completely different field and just drawing, but the basics might be similar or the same throughout the field. But this is something I cannot say. I'm not in Paleo, I'm just drawing stuff. I will mix two more questions, like two in one, because of the time. I know we have not reached the 2 hours yet, but I'm seeing it already coming. Going to Astrid maybe again. Have you experienced unconscious bias or gender-related harassment throughout like the last, let's say the last couple months and also years? And unconscious bias is, I know, I'm not sure if unconscious bias is a term you are aware of, but I just leave it like that for now.
Unfortunately, I'm very aware of it. Yes. Well, that's an interesting question. I think that it is hard to identify bias all of the time. And so I think that even if it was happening, I'm not sure if I would always be aware. I did visit Europe for the first time last year and definitely experienced it there in some countries more than others, unfortunately. But I'm very fortunate in the fact that Australia is, at least at a surface level, more welcoming of some of this stuff. There are some there are some discrepancies in that statement, but I still think that it's it's tricky. Like, for example, the universities will never publicly have bias against that sort of thing or in those fields, but their computer systems might, or maybe their certificates might, or maybe the systems that allow you to not be able to change your ID cards, that might be, perhaps. And these are all totally not real examples. I think that I think that it's something that we all have to be aware of. Like I have my own unconscious bias in indefinitely in a few things. The biggest one that I'm trying to work on is especially in interacting with Australia's Indigenous history, like trying to be really aware and make sure that I'm being very cognizant of local traditions and local stories and really try to, especially in a field where it involves us going up and digging land, which is not undestructive, if you know what I mean. It's a weird situation where you're like, I mean, wanting to know more about the Earth for scientific reasons is not a bad reason, but it's not necessarily wiping away all of the bias that we have towards science and against the idea of protecting the Earth. So I think that we all have unconscious bias, whether we like it or not, and whether it is to do with gender or not. I think that I love to see events like this and like the Women Archaeological Conference. I love to see things like this be more accepting of non-binary individuals. I think that that is very telling of places as to their gender inclusivity, because it is a sometimes more difficult thing for places to understand. But either way, yes, I have experienced it, but I am also fortunate to be in a position where there are people that are still supportive regardless.
Sounds, yeah, it's an interesting take on like choosing this word is an interesting take on it. So I also mentioned like that you received support like from from colleagues, from supervisors, I guess also from friends a lot. What was your biggest challenge you faced career-wise, and maybe if you like to share also personally?
It's a good question. I think if I was to answer that, I mean, in this moment, my answer for that would be the biggest challenge I have had is staying in the same place. And I mean that in a few different ways. The first is that it doesn't allow me to be more resilient of other areas' feelings, which is an unfortunate reality. The other problem is that when you undertake a period of time with a group of people or an institution, and then somewhere down the line, your outward identity is changed, it's much more difficult than if you go to a new location and start that way. And that has been challenging, not just logistically, but also based on prior relationships, both in the research field and not, in terms of having past awards and things, which I just no longer talk about. That's always fun. And I don't know. I think that anyone who's had experience with gender diversity has their own stories in this manner, which I'm sure they could tell. But at least from my perspective, it's very challenging building a whole new identity in not just your personal life, but also in your professional life. If I was to have published something earlier, that makes it real hard now. And it certainly has been a barrier towards not just the publishing of research articles, but the publishing of popular science media and stuff like that. So that would be my answer, but I am also very well aware that people in similar positions have had much more visceral challenges, and I hope that the support is out there on a global scale for people who are suffering at a regional scale.
I really hope the same. It's a really important point you mentioned, and I'm not sure if many people are aware, but you mentioned like changing the whole identity, and you did it like publicly. You invited everybody to join your journey, basically, which I was also part of, was very happy about it. What I realized just from the things you post and share that it's just an assumption, but you seem to be more confident and more happy in what you're doing. Of course, I cannot tell just from pictures, but this is just my assumption. And this is also what other people think when they see more recent posts from you. So based on this assumption, besides your mental health, did also the quality of your work improve? Like, did it go hand in hand? Like, after all, did your mental health improve? I hope so. But also, did your quality of the work improve? Is it like some, as I mentioned, hand in hand journey
Oh gosh. Well, I don't want to take up too much time from the rest of the panel, but I will quickly answer that. I'll say that I think that it is it's a little bit of an unfortunate fantasy that sometimes the changing of one's identity will solve everything. Having said that, it certainly increases comfortability in situations. It makes interpersonal connections feel more real and less practiced and built. But I do think that it's a situation in which the journey doesn't really ever end, but you are grateful that people at least give you the chance to try it, I think. I think that's probably it's a tricky question.
It is a very tricky question. It's also a very vulnerable question, kind of stuff. You also don't need to go into any details, but it's interesting. Like I'm really appreciate and really thankful that you sharing your thoughts on this. And I guess it's just also important to know that people inside, at least the community I'm trying to build, are very inclusive and welcoming and want to support like not only you, but everyone on a similar journey. So I guess not many people are aware that it doesn't solve anything. Like it also will not solve all the problems like that in a week or so. So I guess this should be also clear. And it's also a huge has some impact on the like also on your work, I guess. Like how like not only the what you see in like Google Scholar and whatever, like this kind of publication system, but everything else. Um, Moving forward, like Natalia already left, unfortunately, but I'm very happy, besides her tight schedule, that she made it. Going back to, first of all, thanks, Astrid, for sharing your thoughts on it, being that open. Going to Alyssa, what was the biggest challenge you had to face? Like, I'm aware you had some challenges to face, especially last year, but like maybe career-wise, and what was something to say, okay, this is the biggest challenge, like also from your position you had to face?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of like the low hum of the challenge that exists just existing as a mildly queer woman in paleo spaces. Like, there's always a little bit of the boys' club. There's always going to be some gross dude at a conference that takes how I look as permission to treat me less like a scientist and more like part of the Jurassic Park fantasy, which I always shut down. I find it really gross. If you're listening to this and that's you, stop doing that. No one likes it. But I would say my biggest challenge is something I think probably a lot of people can relate to, which is the challenge of feeling like I don't have the material means to be part of this field. And but by that, what I mean is I come from what is now a middle class family in the Southeast, but my mother was born in a home that did not have plumbing. She made her own clothes. She went to a school that had maybe 50 students. And she, through a lot of determination and being born in the US in the right time, was able to lift herself out of a certain amount of circumstance. But she was still raising a child in the southeastern United States, a famously underprivileged and underfunded, especially scientifically, region of the US. For those who have never looked it up, the trial in the United States that allowed us to teach evolution in schools actually happened about an hour from my hometown. So I would say that despite having an incredibly supportive family and some really supportive friends and a very good cohort in my undergraduate degree, I mean, out of the people I graduated with, I think maybe two of them are still in the field, even broadly in a geological context. So one of them is a hydrologist and one of them is I forget what they're doing now, but essentially these are degrees that it was assumed men were going to get to then go work within like the hydroelectric industry. It was never assumed that this degree was going to necessarily put you in an academic context. And I think there's probably people here who've experienced something like that. You get your undergraduate degree and whatever gives you any foothold in the field, and you volunteer, you do whatever you can. And when I was coming up to the end of my undergraduate degree, I was like, I don't really have the grades, but I kind of want to do this. And then I found out in the US you have to do something called field camp, which is like thousands of dollars to go camp out on Bighorn Sheep Mountain and make a map and crap in the outdoors. And it's like, this is fun to an extent, but I feel like one, this is a lot of money and time that I can't afford to take away from work. Like I can't, and I don't see how this is relevant to proving that I'm capable of doing the research I want to do. This is a contest to see if you're physically fit in a way that does not matter and should not have kept anyone from the field. So I gave up on paleo for a really long time because it just didn't seem like there were any local opportunities. There were no museums in Chattanooga that were going to hire you for that. Great Fossil Site is amazing. It was 3 hours north of me and it already very underfunded. They were not going to be able to employ me. And if they had, it was so competitive in the US, especially. Like there were 5, 10 other people in line ahead of me that had better grades, better academic standing, and let's be honest, a lot of them were probably more conventional men. Um, so I would say, yeah, like the mental battle I faced in 2018 when I first decided to go back into this was probably my biggest challenge. It was like I don't feel like I belong here. I don't have the means to belong here. But I mean, people are going to realize that I'm not like them. They're going to realize I don't have any money. They're going to realize that I don't have any sense. That's a little joke from me to me, but yeah, and I'm really pleased to say that of all of the barriers that still exist in paleontology, and as much as money does play a role and circumstance plays a role, I've been very fortunate to find people like Astrid and Adele who couldn't give a shit how much money my family has or how much money I have. They're gonna treat me like a scientist and like an equal. And I could very much say that for the Australian community. It's been such a breath of fresh air in that sense.
This is quite this is quite huge. I think we are glad you're in the community and everything you do has its place. It's really valued, not only in Australia. I also think, especially with the podcast, what you are doing together with Travis, it has outreach and all the milestones, even though they are quite small. These are milestones and they are recognized. It's quite a lot. I have the same for Adele. Your biggest challenge, like I have like 2 or 3 more questions for you, for all of you. Your biggest challenge you had to face.
So for me, the will I, won't I moment was when I finished my honors degree. And I was studying insects trapped in amber. It was amazing. That was the year that I was like, oh, like I really love paleo. I want to do this for as long as I can. And I got 1 mark off first class honors. And because of that, that shut a lot of doors. I didn't have like great grades and I didn't have any publications to my name at that point. So yeah, it felt impossible. I remember emailing, and I still have these emails, some research groups in New Zealand and also in Europe, and they were just like, nah, we've already got one. You're like, we don't want you. We don't need you. Bye. And yeah, at a certain point, I just really felt like I wasn't good enough. It really challenged the way that I saw myself, and also, yeah, my confidence took like a huge like beating after that. So, and the way that I've sort of combated that recently is it's different when you're applying for jobs and postdoc positions and things like that. But there was an illustrator, and I can't remember who it was. Back when Twitter was Twitter, back in my day, they posted something and they had 100 failures, and they were trying to actively seek 100 rejections, and it wasn't a non-response didn't count. You had to get the rejections. Becoming more comfortable with rejections was a way that during my PhD that I've been able to sort of pick myself up and overcome those like negative beliefs as well. And when you have proof of things that you've done, even if it's just an Instagram post or a DM from someone who is like, thank you so much for coming to our children's library and reading a picture book to like 3 kids, those things do add up. And if people don't already do this, I would highly recommend having a little folder where you have those nice emails and those nice messages. And on really low points, when your mental health is really bad, make yourself a nice cup of tea, take time to read them. You will not feel worse after having read it, I hope.
Yeah, no, it really makes sense. All in all, and I will just continue with you, Adele, what would you wish from your colleagues or surroundings to do better? Like, let's keep it with the equality of women in paleo or in the society or something. Like, I hope it is already applicable for most of your friends and colleagues, but if you would like to wish what people could do better.
Yeah. So I think for people who it's difficult because I very much prescribe to the you put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help others. For me, for people who are in stable positions and have the capacity to do so, I think publicly condemning things and also pushing back against systemic practices that sort of continue or protect practices that have happened historically rather than sort of broadening and rewarding more diverse experiences. That would be really nice. But just thinking about the team that I'll be working with going forward in the next chapter of my career, I'm really optimistic about the fact that my line manager, I know in the past has changed the timing of fieldwork to suit another member of the team so that they're studying, I think they're studying full time while also working full time and also a mum of four. They're just a kick-ass person. But my line manager has like rearranged fieldwork so that this amazing colleague can then go to the other side of the country and do some in-person practical classes. So I think ideally it's both that individual practice but also that pushback and trying to push organizations to do better and say, you know, I hate loaded questions so much, but sometimes just starting with, hey, we don't support this, right, is sometimes the best way forward.
I'm passing the same question to Alyssa.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you.
I have some very strong feelings about what's happened in the last couple of days that I won't get into too much here, other than to say that this is this is not my personal experience, but I know some women in our field who have had harassing or abusive experiences within our field from people that remain in our field. And we as academics are in this unique position that I would really like senior male academics to appreciate, where unlike other jobs, there is a legacy that becomes attached to any person of significance in our field that is almost permanent. If you are naming fossils, if you are the first to publish on something, if you are the lead author on a paper that is important in the field, your victim might end up having to cite you. They might have to contend with your presence in their workplace indefinitely. And if I was a woman who had been severely victimized, I don't think I would want to stay in a field that treated me like that. So I think it's about changing the way that we think about these indiscretions when powerful people do them. And this is not the first scandal in paleontology like this. There is so much reporting, especially on some of the things that have broken in Canada since the pandemic. And all of these instances are full of banal, passive people in power, usually men, who don't push back, who continue to publish with these figures, who rely on other women as a whisper network to protect themselves. And I think that's heinous. I think that we are all intelligent, incredibly creative people. And if we are not extending that creativity and that admiration that we can have for a weird dead guy that we dug up to a live person in our labs who needs a little bit extra help or a little bit more protection, we should be doing that. It should never be a question of, oh, we have to redesign this field trip because somebody in a wheelchair wants to come. It should be awesome. We have somebody who can't even like get to the field in a normal way like we can, and they are that excited about doing this research. How do we get them out there? How do we say yes to including more people in a field that's so saturated with enthusiasts for the field? How do we get more people to feel comfortable and safe in that field? I would encourage male academics in positions of power to consider how they're treating their students, how much some of the usual razzing that goes on in the field can just kind of be hazing, and how much we can support women to feel safe in our labs in our field. There's some like excellent reporting by Riley Black that highlights the tremendous amount of harassment that goes on in those settings. So I think it's being especially aware of these corridors where negative things and negative experiences can happen. So I would just encourage like consider how this would feel from your student's perspective, which might sound like very basic advice, but if no one's told you yet, Mr. Senior Academic, that is what you should do.
I guess this makes sense, and even the most basic advice might be the most helpful in this case. Astrid, what would you wish from your colleague surroundings to do better?
God, I wish people were just kinder to everyone else. I'm definitely going to start this by piggybacking a little bit on what Alyssa said and say that even if the quote unquote disability, it's a loaded word, is not a always visible one, I wish that field work was more kind to that. Recently had an experience where I was locked out of a conservation volunteer position in New Zealand because of stuff along those lines, and I just thought it was very sad. I mean, part of you, like, the cold logical part of you is like, I understand that it's a challenge, but we shouldn't be prioritizing our own inability to like tackle those challenges over accessibility for others. I don't know. But so I did wonder if this was going to be a topic just because the timing has been so horrifically terrible. But I I I don't know. I think that do you know what? My opinion of this is that there are some people in the world who have very bad attitudes about things. And I kind of believe, look, maybe these people can change and be redeemed, maybe. I kind of doubt it. I'm not approaching them. I'm not gonna like push things in that direction. However, I do think there's a huge chunk of every field in which there are a lot of people that don't stand up to things like this for the main reason of personal embarrassment, where they are embarrassed. They don't want to say that they made a mistake. They don't want to say that their organization is anything less than fantastic. They don't want to have anything that goes against their choices or their feelings and things like that. And look, embarrassment is a very human emotion. It's something that we all understand. But I think that that's the target audience, right? It's these people that are not the monsters, it's the people that are perpetuating bad behavior through inaction or through a lack of wanting to be seen as weak or change or anything like that. And unfortunately, like, look, when it comes to gender discussions, I think that it's important to mention that in male-dominated fields, for example, men being seen as weak is seen as quite bad. And so these like masculine presenting people often are in situations where they feel super embarrassed doing anything that makes them seem out of the ordinary or out of the grind or out of the like we're in line with what we're doing. And I think that's terrible. It should be we're not trying to prop any one group up over the other. We're trying to make everyone feel good. And I think that it's a real shame. And I think that that's something that can be changed. Like, we can see that there are people out there that can really step above that and stick their necks up and be that tall poppy and be like, look, this is wrong. Even regardless of the position I'm in, regardless if it jeopardizes my finances, which is a real problem for a lot of people. I just think that we should be all far more caring and acceptable and accepting of people's feelings on this. Prestige should never come above that, ever.
I guess there's nothing to add. Thank you for your thoughts. I will do for the very last question, the same round back, if you don't mind. Astrid, what are you really appreciative for in this? Like we talked a lot of serious stuff, from very generalized topics deep to like very personal stuff. What do you appreciate the most? Where do you get your motivation from, especially regarding women in paleontology, women in paleo art?
This is the sign of a good host, folks. They ended on this kind of question. All right. I'm appreciative of a lot of things. Look, we're all people that love animals, and some of them happen to be dead. And I think that animals are what fill my energy cup very often, whether it's in person or vicariously through other people's work or through research, through rocks. I think that seeing that shared love and passion in anyone is fantastic. And what makes me excited about this is seeing any kind of change. I am excited when things change, whether it be on a grand scale or a small scale for the better. Like, for example, my supervisors never dealt with gender diversity as far as I can tell, ever. But they've been great. Look, I mean, there's challenges. There always will be. But it's been fine. And I think that it's always good to see people be accepting of that. And I try and, especially when we're caught up in the weeds of publications and things like that, I try to always center myself and remember that what we are working on is life. Like whether or not it's around now, whether or not it was an individual animal that just happened to die in a way that preserved their body, like that's just it's just something really precious, and I think that is the core of this field. Whether it's women in paleontology working on it, non-binary people, any kind of gender, I think that that magic is something that we shouldn't necessarily logic down to infinity. Like sometimes we focus so much on here's this angular process of this bone, but maybe we could focus a little bit more on the stories of these living things. I don't know. I'm that's just my perspective, but I really do see a lot of hope in places like this, in the people that I see online, whether it's a biased platform or not, and I look forward to seeing their work always.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I will just, yeah, same question, different person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I say this a lot, but one of the things that really gives me positive energy and hope in our field is like one of the things we talk a lot about in therapy because I have a PTSD, and one of the things that we talk about is we cannot change the past. We can only make the future better. And if no one was there for you when you needed them, be the person that's there. And I see so many women and non-binary people in our field today that are maybe a couple years older than me who are doing that. Like Marissa Betts kicks ass, takes no prisoners. She has so many female and gender diverse students. She has this like will to put anyone in the field who wants to be there. And I see a lot of that. I see a lot of people that are younger than me, like Lucy, who is a phenomenal science communicator and comes up with all of these incredible and creative theories and is accepted, I hope, for who she is and for the way that they are treated. And I try in my own life to like I don't like to give into that impulse to make yourself less than who you are to fit a certain academic standard. Like I look to people like Adele who don't make those compromises. They wear what they want to wear. They are who they want to be. And I think when we show up in public spaces and we're talking to students, we talk to young people, like when I talk to little kids, but when I especially talk to high schoolers, it's like they have all this hope and they have all this desire to learn about these amazing animals, and nobody has told them all of this terrible stuff that we've gone over. And it's not just about warning them, it's about showing them that someone who's like them is someone who's going to help them, someone who's going to support them, somebody who's going to be the advocate, somebody who's going to push for them to be part of whatever the next step is alongside all these like much more privileged people. It's about I guess, trying to act as a person that they can speak to in a trusted capacity as well, because there's so much alienation and there's so many feelings that we all have to live with alone of like inferiority complex or imposter syndrome. And I think seeing people like us be honest about the fact that we struggle with that stuff too. Our grades weren't perfect. We've had road bumps too. It's hard for us to get jobs. Like I think that's really important. And I guess more broadly, like one of the things that I was talking recently about with a colleague was I feel like in paleontology there was that first golden age that you kind of got during the bone wars and whatever. But we are very much, I think, in a second renaissance for our field due to the influx of like so many people our age that came into university in the 90s and 2000s now entering into these graduate positions due in part to the advances in globalization. As Natalia says, there are communities that are inaccessible to us because we're not on like the Japanese chat surface line, but we can still look at research by those people. We can still view their videos. We can still look at their paleo art in a way that would not have been accessible to us prior to the internet. And I think even though these platforms are evil and Instagram makes me scroll forever and it makes me sad, we are more interconnected. And we do have this amazing potential right now to change the field, to make it more kind, as Astrid says, I mean, there's more of us than there are of them. And isn't this the classic scenario where we make something better? I have to believe in that. Otherwise, I would go nuts. But I'm sure, yeah, like I want to hear what Adele thinks.
In terms of the things that I'm grateful for and give me hope, it's other people's vulnerability and openness. We've sort of touched on this throughout this conversation that we are limited to our own experiences, but when people are willing to share their own experiences and give you a little sense of what it is like for them, I think that just broadens things up as well. And yeah, at the end of the day, we are connected by these extinct organisms, whether it's like weird little spore and pollen grains and Anomalocaris, spanning like millions, sometimes billions of years. At the end of the day, we get to bond over those things through our human connections, and those are the things that shine the brightest.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Does Paleosaurin have a question? I see a hand up.
Please feel free to ask question.
Can you hear me? All right. So no questions, but I truly understand all of you because like your journeys are really inspiring, and I truly relate to all of you because when I ended high school, I didn't actually know who I truly was. So like I was trying to like I was good at many things, but like I didn't have any idea of like what my true identity was. And I spent like around 2-3 years like trying to figure out, and I went to really dark places like subconsciously of like asking like who am I, what am I good at, like what am I supposed to do, like if you are good at many things or like open to many, like are you actually defined by something? I have no idea, and I didn't know what career to do. Actually, I didn't have much money honestly to start with because I wanted to work on something related to the concept design or speculative evolution or like creature design, something that truly resonated with me. And like there was nothing that I could afford because like also I started learning on my own. I started learning 3D when I was almost 12. So by 21, I mean, I had like almost 10 years of experience, So like I wouldn't learn anything more than what they were teaching because I already know many things. So I spent like introspection for years and and having really tough times figuring it out. And then it's when by the end of 2022, I figured out that I could try being a paleoartist. And part of realizing that is that I figured out that you need to be someone to actually exist. And when you reach that point, it's when you be like, I exist, even if I don't have body, if I don't have any shape, I already exist. So keeping that in mind, there's a moment to create your own identity, to create your own personality, to create your own world based on what you are capable of doing, based on just yourself existing. Because like many people, like I have this past and I have the experiences, and based on that, I can do things, and I'm unable to do other stuff. No, I went to the complete nothingness, and I realized that I can become anything I want. I plan to inspire many more people following my journey of how you need to be like stuck on the past. You have the power to become something you truly are meant to be, independent of who you are, of where you come from, of your money. Because right now, I'm literally in the nothingness. Like, I need money like anyone else needs. However, with my journey, I plan to inspire many other people in the same situation that are doubting of themselves, that are studying because like they need to work, but they actually don't know who they want to be, what they want to achieve. And very important, find out that there's plenty of more people in your same journey with the same doubts of what are the good thoughts and like how they feel sometimes inferior in things that they have not much experience, but they have the power inside to overcome that, to get confident in everything, and to make people feel the same way and to believe in themselves. And after 2025, when I started, I was so afraid. Many of you are right now in this meeting, I must say, and I'm really grateful how I met you all, and you've influenced me a lot. And from all the ones you've here, like I can actually learn many things from you all. I can take a single part of all of you and be like, I truly relate to all of this because like I know that from inside of me. So yeah, I'm really grateful for this, and I've learned a lot from all the things you've said about, like, for example, when you say about when I didn't read this and I was afraid of having I made a mistake and having like a huge impact. Like I truly relate to that. No, no lie. but yeah, knowing how far you are in your paths, like you're really inspiring people, and I'm really thankful of being in here and being able to meet you all, and that you are also on the path of inspiring and helping other people to become a better person, also make a huge change in the overall reality. And I'm really thankful for that. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
I think I can nothing add to that. This is perfect. For my final note, I will just want to thank you for your time. It's really nice to talk to you. Also, that freely, that open-minded about this very serious topic. So